Previously on Radicalized, Truth Survives podcast.
What can you say about those accounts that are causing online harms?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is that the Pareto principle absolutely applies here. You're looking at 20% of the actors who create 80% of the harms. I think that the same people recirculate, and we see the same people pop up again and again, right? Where we see a new incident come up, right? Someone's upset, someone's being harassed off the internet. Someone, often a prominent woman of color, is being just terrorized. Right. And they're being terrorized using the internet. There isn't a great solution. What do? Do you report it to social media? Do you report it to the FBI? Do you report it to the cops? I mean, you're talking about law enforcement that doesn't have the capabilities and the resources to really deal with much of the stuff that happens out on the streets, much less out on the cyber streets. Right. So we're seeing a lot of these same actors pop up again and again, and there doesn't seem to be a methodology for handling them. Right. From a law enforcement perspective, it looks like whack-a-mole. And so they haul them in when they can, when there's a reason to. You know, I'm thinking of one in particular who was brought in for threatening a federal agent. And he was incarcerated for several years for this, and now recently released. And he's back out on the streets harassing and threatening and, being very aggressive on the internet again. And so I really want to know what the solution is for these.
Oh, Jackie, we are so happy that you are back with us. As everybody knows, Jackie's a cybersecurity expert, and she was a lead threat analyst on Joe Biden's campaign. Some of our viewers have met you before in episode 31, where you talked about the global scope of this cognitive warfare that we are in and some of the things that we can do to protect ourselves. As we are seeing it ramp up right now, we thought it was so important to bring you back, Jackie. And can you tell our viewers kind of a snapshot of some of your career highlights, and then we're going to jump right in.
Yeah, sure thing. Thank you so much, Heidi. Jim, high five for having me back. I tend to say yes when friends invite me back to things. So thank you. Feels like a party. So my name is Jackie. For the folks in the audience who don't know me yet, my most recent big gig was working as the lead incident responder and cyber threat analyst on the campaign to elect Joe Biden and Kamala Harris in 2020. And prior to that, I started my career in the military. I left the military and became a defense contractor, worked in Iraq and then later Africa for many years. I think all in all, I've spent about half a decade overseas in Iraq. And when I came back to the U.S. from Africa, I started working in the commercial world and advising the global Fortune 1000 as to how to be secure, how to do the cybersecurity thing as an organization and as a team, and kind of run the defensive sport that cybersecurity is. And so really glad to be here. My last role was working as a director at the Surveillance Technology Oversight Project. And what I did there was I served as a subject matter expert, lead technology and operations and cybersecurity, of course. And the organization's mission is to litigate and advocate against the government use of mass surveillance. Right. So we're in this strange world of data just kind of rolling around. We have no national privacy legislation. And so that was a major focus of mine. And now I'm just about to drop out of film school, and I do a lot of writing on my blog at hackingbutlegal.com.
So now
Jackie, don't feel bad.
Now everybody knows why Jim has referred to her heretofore as President Jackie Singh. Jackie, you're a badass. We love you. We're so glad you're here. So
thank you.
We have talked a lot about, the fact that we're in an undeclared war. It's an information war, a lot of active measures, chaos and destabilization events. And we've had no Western leaders standing up and saying, yes, the West is, being targeted by active measures, and we are in a cognitive warfare. And here's how we're going to fight back. We rely on people like you to tell us how to fight back. I personally rely on you to instruct me on how to fight back and how to respond. What can you tell people from your expertise of what they're seeing right now in 2023 and how it's going to ramp up in 2024? And then we'll get to some solutions. But what do you see right now? What's the purpose of this?
I'm just shaking my head as you're saying this because it's such a disaster. You know, it's an ongoing oil spill. The amount of disinfo and misinfo, right, that we're seeing pushed into the information space looks a lot like an oil spill, a series of oil spills, disastrous ones, right? They're contaminating the information environment. It's becoming toxic. It's become toxic. And we can't really tell the difference between a clean molecule and like a dirty oil molecule, right? Like the information is, it kind of goes directly in line with a Russian strategy for disinformation, which is to put good information together with bad information, right? Maybe the bulk of a story is true and real and written in a factual way, but then there's one or two facts in there that are intended to pass muster with an audience. And so you're seeing a lot of, I'm seeing a lot of tactics that I would think originate with intelligence agencies. And the research that I've done into hack for hire firms, into firms like Cambridge Analytica and those that have come after that, really seem to me to suggest that the intelligence agencies of the world, especially the Western agencies, are leaking personnel. And that revolving door between intelligence and corporations, private corporations who have no mandate to avoid hacking people's computers or hacking people's minds realistically, especially if they're doing it from overseas, where it becomes even more difficult to attribute the activity and to bring them to justice. I think they're just getting away with it scot-free. And I think that's been increasing. We're seeing it increase in greater numbers, in greater scope and scale from 2015, 2016 onward, which is where I started to personally observe this, I would say, manipulation of our social media and of our media environment, right? To a certain extent, people have always had the suspicion that, you know, an op-ed might be placed for a certain purpose, or, you know, a newspaper might have a certain slant. But I think what we're seeing today is really quite different, where you might open the New York Times and see two op-eds that are completely and totally diametrically opposed in every political way, but are presented as though both are legitimate, are fully legitimate and fleshed out ideas. So, you know, again, lots of different tactics, but the most important thing to remember about all of it is that they're destroying trust. The goal is to destroy trust. The goal is to get us to distrust each other, to distrust other communities, to distrust other races, to distrust other genders, to distrust the medical establishment. Absolutely. There was a huge push during COVID to distrust the government and what the government is telling us, and whether the government you know, should be providing us services and where the money goes, right? They want us to stop trusting each other because that's the social fabric that unites us.
Yes. And what you were describing is malinformation and parasitizing. You'll have an article that sounds legit, and then they plant the bomb of malinformation or parasitizing in order to just destroy truth, trust, and all of that. And why are foreign nation states, as well as our own internal traitors, working so hard to destroy trust? What is the goal of that?
The goal is one, to increase social unrest. They want to pit person against person. I think we're seeing that more and more. There are people who are reporting that they're getting fight videos in their For You, right, feed on Twitter. There are folks who are really pointing out the things that we've seen highlighted in the recent source code disclosure this week, right? That there are political persuasions being identified on the social network, and the people are being treated differently based on that. And, you know, realistically, I think the release of Twitter source code itself has to be seen as an op based on the behavior that Elon Musk has had over time. And what we're looking at when we look at that source code is whatever Elon Musk and Ella Irwin, who's the lead, who replaced Yoel Roth in trust and safety, right? Someone who has in the past had various professional roles that are very close to the world of cybersecurity. The folks over at Trust and Safety operate in a little bit of a different world. But, you know, we're seeing these vast breaches of ethics that could only have originated from the trust and safety group at Twitter. And so you really have to ask yourself what the veracity of this information is, and, you know, feel kind of sad for all of the technologists who are analyzing this code in good faith and drawing conclusions from it, which is exactly what he intended.
All right, I got a million questions, but gentlemen, you go ahead and jump in. Jim?
Well, first of all, I have to say I took a look at that source code, and the first thing I thought was, you know, if this was a 2-week-old startup, I would tell them, you know, they need adult supervision immediately if they want to go anywhere. Because, I mean, like, numbers are just hard coded in there. It's like, you know, it's just terrible, terrible engineering altogether. And I'm sorry to say that, but, you know, there it is. I want to talk a little bit about your article that you recently did on Michael Hastings and, you know, our collective interaction with Joe Flynn. Briefly for the audience, Michael Hastings was an investigative journalist who was looking into Stanley McChrystal, Mike Flynn, Charlie Flynn, the whole sort of operation that was going on in Afghanistan, which included Eric Prince at Blackwater and lots of, you know, very, very ugly things. So he wrote a book in 2012 called The Operators, and then he died in a one-car crash in June of 2013. And for me, the circumstances around that have always been questionable. And Joe Flynn, Mike's brother, downplayed it, mocked it, made fun of it. And you wrote an article about that. And I just wanted to get your thoughts a little bit about why you wrote that article, why you thought it was important.
Yeah. So Michael Hastings was on my radar even when I was just, you know, a defense contractor working overseas in Iraq, because this person was writing about people that all of us knew at the time. All of us knew who Stan McChrystal was, right? These people had a mythos, and you know, within the military, especially within the contractor community as well. And so I remember reading a piece by Michael Hastings in Rolling Stone about Stan McChrystal that rocked me, and it rocked everybody that I knew. And the portrait was of a general gone rogue, right? And so my understanding is that there have been various incidents in which commanders have acted in ways that were completely contrary to good order and discipline in the military and the way that you're taught. And you know, the Army values, for example, loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, and personal service. It spells out leadership. Now, this is stuff that's drilled into every military person. And so when you see some of the activities of the people that are around military leaders, you really have to ask yourself some serious questions. And so when you, Jim, and you, Hi-Fi, were having a casual kind of borderline, you know, antagonistic conversation back and forth with this person whose brothers are powerful beyond measure, right? Michael Flynn is a powerful dude. Michael Flynn knows a lot of people. Charlie Flynn commands 100,000 troops in the Pacific, right? On PBS Frontline, we were very clearly told that Joe Flynn plans and strategizes with his brother Michael, right? He, you know, they told us that. He told us that. He also told us, I don't know why I do these interviews. He couldn't even really explain why he does these things. And I also couldn't understand why he was saying the things he was saying to y'all. Chiefly threatening people who write for a living and threatening people that write about your family becomes extra suspect when you threaten them within the context of a death that's unexplained by saying the person had car trouble, where the official narrative is that this person, you know, one of his brothers variously claimed he could have been on drugs and alcohol. I read the autopsy report. He was not. You know, there were a lot of inconsistencies about this story. There were a lot of things that he did before his death that seemed to indicate that he had a concern about his car. And, you know, as a cybersecurity expert, I'm well aware and personally know people in the industry who work on these things, right? You think of a name like, say, Charlie Miller. You can Google that name and look at what they did with a Jeep. You know, him and his partner were able to remotely drive a Jeep back, I think, in 2014. So it was pretty soon after what happened to Michael Hastings, there were a lot of questions being asked about automotive security. And then the DEF CON hacker conference established a car security village, car hacking village, right? There's a lot of movement and progress on this. And I think Michael Hastings' death was part of that. I think there were a lot of questions from people as to whether his system, which was network enabled, which has a pretty, you know, complex system compared to especially most other vehicles of the time, what happened there? He was wearing his seatbelt at the time of the crash. He wasn't under the influence, and his vehicle was accelerating so quickly that, you know, a witness said that there were sparks emanating from the vehicle even before he lost control, apparently, and hit a tree. So there are a lot of just weird things about this that I thought I should point out, because look, if you have really powerful people, you have somebody who is the director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, right? You have a top spook whose brother is making jokes about the unexplained death of an investigative journalist. It fits into this whole narrative of, you know, who cares about the press? We can intimidate the press. We can potentially jail the press if they're in another country, in a less free democratic country. We can harass them with SLAPP, with you know, strategic lawsuits against public participation, which is what recently happened to my colleague Scott Stedman at Forensic News. They look for pretty much any avenue. And when you're thinking about bad actors that have a huge amount of resources working against just one regular person, one journalist, or, you know, somebody who might not even be working under the banner of a very large institution. You know, Hastings was working for BuzzFeed. He was working for Rolling Stone, right? Rolling Stone has a history of doing these great long forms, but they're not the New York Times and they're not the Washington Post. So he didn't necessarily have that protection of a big newsroom, which I think made him, you know, also a target. So I do lay out a lot of facts on my blog. I would love for people to take a look, especially anybody who's interested in, you know, true crime, because I think that's really what we're looking at here, is an admission that there's more to the story. And is it an admission that Joe Flynn has access to classified information? Is it that he has, you know what I mean? Like, what really happened there? I think Hastings' widow deserves an answer.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out two other, I think, important facts. And these are just facts. One of the last people that Michael Hastings spoke to or communicated with was Joseph Biggs. Joseph Biggs, leader of the Proud Boys, currently on trial for seditious conspiracy in the insurrection, which Mike Flynn was, you know, a major leader of, to say the least. Also, at the same time, Michael Flynn, as you said, the top military spook in the United States of America, was in GRU headquarters. The first American to ever visit GRU headquarters. That's where Mike Flynn was. When Michael Hastings died, Mike Flynn made friends with Igor Sergin, who was head of the GRU at the time, invited him to come to the United States. And then when Igor Sergin died at the beginning of 2016, sort of mysteriously himself, Mike Flynn sent an email to Sergei Kislyak, sending his condolences. There's a lot of very, very weird shit going on around here. And it all, as Heidi said before, connects back up to what is happening right now. It's the same people.
Look, I hate to talk about this stuff because I'm not a conspiracy theorist. You know, I want to make very clear to your audience that as a cybersecurity professional, I say cybersecurity because it's easier for people to understand, but I'm an InfoSec professional. I'm an information security professional. I don't believe in bullshit. I don't, you know, I'm not an Alex Jones fan, you know, like it's not the style that I'm interested in, right? I'm interested in like, what can I verify? What are the facts? And realistically, a lot of these connections and network connections, we can only observe, you know, indicators of those relationships from the outside, right? Yeah. Which for some people will lead them to think, oh, that sounds like a conspiracy theory. No, what we know are these facts, right? And so you can always be clear about what the facts are. And so, look, I can only imagine that the Russians were falling over themselves with happiness when, you know, Mike Flynn fell into their lap. I just can't imagine how freaking happy they were.
Right. So
what a gift.
Right. Last point on this. 6 months after Mike Flynn went to GRU headquarters, Putin invaded Ukraine with Spetsnaz soldiers, took over Crimea without a peep from the Defense Intelligence Agency.
I want to say again,
why do we have a war right now? Because of that.
Charles Flynn, you know, commands 100K troops in the Pacific while they're beating the drum about how dangerous TikTok is. Yeah. Right. They're beating, you know, like if you really want to talk about China, why aren't we talking about the genocide in Xinjiang province? Why, you know, why aren't we talking about their insane surveillance state and how, you know, what a lot of the products and services that are being sold over there are now starting to make their way to other places like towards the Palestinians or here in the United States. You know what I mean? Like there isn't really a
the balloons, Jackie, the balloons.
The
balloon was great. The balloon was an excellent device, was it not? I mean,
yes,
you couldn't have written it. It was just like, it's like a novel. Yeah. It's like a you know, it was ridiculous.
we see what's going on here. So I just want to, I've been an investigative reporter. I think I'm going on my 4th decade now. So for a long time for me, I've been doing this for a really long time. And so, we also work in the world of facts, and I've never liked coincidences, but I want to just reverse engineer this story for just a moment. The ops that are coming out of the woodwork to try to run malinformation campaigns on us for even revisiting this curious accident, to me says a lot. When you all of a sudden are swarmed by clear ops who've been set part of the reason I opened with that clip is to show the same groups of people are contract players that then take on new contracts. So when there is a very coordinated effort to try to snuff out this conversation, it's just like with Jim's discovery of Mike Flynn doing a cultic prayer in a Christian church.
Which was fantastic, by the way.
The swarms on that. The way to offset it was to continually post the video so people could see for themselves why thousands of Christians are signing petitions against Mike Flynn portraying himself as a false prophet, because that is exactly what
the Archangel Michael. I mean,
that's what the prayer reveals. So as you were saying, it's quite a gift for the for the Kremlin when somebody like that lands in your lap. But so so for me, those are the two things. The one thing is the swarming of the same ops to try to run malinformation campaigns on us to quiet that conversation. Data point, as Hi-Fi taught me, you know, data point. And then the other thing, of course, is simply that when something that is so unusual concludes so quickly, that historically, you can talk about many, many examples where a decade later, 20 years later, 25 years later, you know, some commission comes out and said, here's what really happened. So it's the duty of us who are, in my case, receiving death threats instigated by the same person who is downplaying this incident. It's our duty to then point it out and to investigate it. So that is very different from what people would like to discuss as conspiracies. So yes, high five.
Jackie, I want to get kind of nerdy here for a minute.
He wants to get nerdy with you.
First off, thank you for being you, because you and me, we're from the internet and we're here to help. But one of the things I learned in my, 25 plus years in technology is that when you're plugging in a computer, like in the very beginning, you could only plug a computer into one network, right? But we figured out for redundancy reasons and all sorts of different reasons that it's good to be able to plug multiple things into the same network node, right?
Sure.
So when I'm investigating these people, I am looking at them as nodes in a network, and I am plugging multiple facts, multiple social connections, multiple financial connections, multiple behavioral connections into these people. Would you say that that's a decent way to come up with a network diagram of just what the heck might be going on right now?
I think anytime that you're trying to, anytime that you need data, you might have to generate that data if you can't get it from somewhere else. You know, and you know, sometimes you might need to poke a bear in order to generate some data, and I think it could be useful. You know, if you refuse to interact with your target, you remain in the shadows, right? Your investigation target, right? But that doesn't always yield the most information. Like maybe you hit a dead end. Maybe you've just seen everything that you can see. Maybe you've observed everything you can observe from the types of behavior that are typically aimed at that individual. And maybe they just respond differently, you know, your sixth time. And so I think certainly the commentary about Michael Hastings, I think, left a big impression at the Flynn household, because Joe decided he was going to delete all his tweets right after I published that thing. I mean, poor bastard probably got yelled at by his older brother. I mean, that's just embarrassing.
Hours.
Yeah, it's just embarrassing, you know, like that guy just runs his life or whatever, right? I just find it sad. But anyway, he's offline for a while. His brother's offline for a while. His brother comes back and pretends like nothing happened. And then Joe comes back and tries to play it off. And just the psychology of these people is interesting, because Joseph Flynn was not in the military, and Joseph Flynn was not a PSYOPs officer. And Joseph Flynn doesn't, you know, intellectually know everything that his brothers do. He doesn't have, you know, like the same kind of psychological makeup that his brothers do. So, you know, to me, it seems like
a little more explicit. I think Joe Flynn is patient zero in Mike Flynn's PSYOPs. I mean, Joe Flynn was just a normal, like, kind of beer drinking Democrat, you know, maybe on the conservative side for a long time. And all of a sudden now he's in QAnon. I mean, he's just spurting all the same stuff that, you know, all of Flynn's propagandists do. And frankly, the whole family, you know, let's set Charlie Flynn aside for a second, the guy who has 100,000 troops. All the other siblings are participating in Mike's organization, in his propaganda.
Yeah, they sure are. I think it's really weird, you know, watching a video of all of them reciting a QAnon pledge, where we go one, we go all.
Yeah.
I mean, right? Anybody who's been looking at this stuff for 5 minutes, you don't have to be an expert like you, Jim, to know where we go one, we go all, right? That's just 100%, 100,000% QAnon. You know what they did? They turned around and sued CNN for publishing this video and calling it a QAnon pledge, right?
And guess what? They put my tweets in that lawsuit.
So
I want to just leave my tweets in the $75 billion lawsuit against CNN to prove that CNN was sending, you know, trolls or whatever at them. So that was one of my proudest moments, I have to admit, when I saw my tweets in there.
All I wanted to say is, as a crew who's been targeted by these malign and pernicious actors, Hi-Fi said it best a few weeks ago when he said that the Flynns would rather start World War III than go to therapy.
Yeah, I mean, look, you look at people who need therapy. Every single person who comes out of the military needs intensive therapy. I really don't care. I don't care how long you were in. I don't care if you were in boot camp and then you got kicked out of boot camp for being an idiot. You know, you probably need therapy after that too, right?
Well, it's okay. It's a traumatic process, right? You take a human who is not naturally a killer and you turn them into someone who is willing to kill. That's traumatic.
To do what they have to do for the team.
What has to be done. Yeah. So now here's something. Hold on. I got a couple follow-ups because I need to discuss this with you. The first follow-up, when Joe Flynn came back after his moment of silence, he said, "Yes, I delete my tweets on a regular basis. Who gives a shit?" And I would just like to point out that in his lawsuit against CNN, they want to know if documents were deleted or destroyed. So they may care. But the second thing I want to bring up is you and I were talking and something happened to some of your accounts. after this article went public. Would you like to discuss that?
Something happened to some of my accounts. What do you mean by that? What are you referring to?
So
some of your devices, maybe?
Oh, yeah. So I was really public about this yesterday. I just kind of thought about what the best course of action would be. And I realistically want to make sure that attackers understand that like their movements are noticed. You can't just run around doing whatever you want and pretend like no one's going to notice you. And furthermore, if assailants who were 100% in my iCloud account, if these assailants potentially work at Apple, that would be really concerning for me. I've been following the folks at Apple for some time. They hire a lot out of the 3-letter agencies. They have a pretty serious corporate security function, and they have a really gross amount of malfeasance at that company, right? Just like stuff that's that doesn't meet any standard of corporate ethics. And so, the first question I have to ask myself is there someone inside Apple that's enabling this? Because my devices were on lockdown mode, right? I'm in, I've got like all the security settings, right? I've got everything set in a way that should protect me, and they were still able to get in. And so it begs the question as to how they did it, right? Resourced attacker, a well-resourced attacker who has access to toolkit, 0-day information, right? Or B, somebody who works inside the company, where there have been some suspicions here or there, given the amount of access that tech companies have to all of our devices, that there have been tampering incidents here and there, especially with folks who leave Apple and then speak out against their former workplace. So, just to go over what that incident was, I'm hanging out on FaceTime with my mother-in-law, right? I don't talk to anybody on the phone except for my family members, and not about anything that anyone would consider political, right? Like these are very inane conversations about our kids and stuff. And I received a message on my screen that informed me that a new link had been generated for that FaceTime call from my own iCloud account, from an alias on my own iCloud account. And so pretty much flipping into incident response mode at that point, then you start looking at what's going on with your account. For anyone who's concerned about about their iOS device, please do me a favor and go to the App Store and download the iVerify app, IVER IFY. And what that does is it walks you through all of the security settings that you should have on your device, and just talks about how to get those done. Super useful and handy. But I found a device on my account that wasn't mine. It was a Chromecast device. And I had just done a sweep of my devices a week prior. So thanks for bringing that up. That's perfect. That's exactly it. iVerify. I had done a sweep of my devices, so I knew what was on there. So I was able to remove this extra device. And as we were going through and doing the cleanup, my partner on his MacBook Pro received a message letting him know that someone was accessing our Google Home from my own account, from that alias. So now is the time to set up security keys. Now I've got security keys on my Apple account. Pretty much anything that I do, I have to use my security key. If anyone is really wanting to improve the security of their Apple and Google accounts, use the security key. For Google, you can look up Google Advanced Protection Program. This is a special thing that you won't be able to find otherwise unless you Google it that way, at Google Advanced Protection Program, and it'll enroll you in a system that forces you to use security keys and reduces the access that third-party apps and just different types of setups can have, and the impact they can have on your account, which can sometimes create, those openings. So for me, it's important to realize journalists and bloggers and activists are regularly targeted. This is real. It happens frequently. Look up the work of the Citizen Lab out of Toronto. If you're interested in what some of those breakdowns look like and how activists and civil society are being compromised by governments especially. But there are also, there are so many different layers to this hi-fi. Like Michael Hastings was afraid that his car was hacked. He had his brother help him look under his car the day before he died. He, at roughly 1 o'clock in the morning, went to his neighbor's house and asked his neighbor to borrow her Volvo. She said no, because it was having mechanical issues. She said he seemed scared and then he wanted to get out of town. And so all we know is that by 4 o'clock in the morning, he was racing out of town and didn't want to take that Mercedes, and then he died in that Mercedes, right? So as the writer, you have to think to yourself, okay, are these general threats of the type that hit journalists? Because journalists have to think about all the things that they've written and all the enemies, the powerful people who don't want their secrets revealed, who now consider that journalist to be an enemy. Are all those people coming after you? Maybe, maybe not. An element of timing is important here, right? The element of importance. I'm just a blogger. Guys. Generally speaking, there isn't a lot of reason. There's a big, like, I wouldn't think for me personally, there'd be a huge targeting push. Like, I just don't really feel important enough. I don't have enough views, you know, nobody really cares what I have to say. And so realistically, not having a platform and then posting something and then getting that kind of reaction, a very pointed ignore from the Flynn family and a very pointed hacking of my device, right? Or of my devices, of my iCloud account. Those two things go together to me, right? You can say, oh, that seems like a conspiracy theory, Jackie. It could have been anybody that hacked you. I mean, who knows how long they were in there, right?
I mean, look, it's also not a conspiracy theory that a whole bunch of these, you know, accounts just show up out of nowhere and start, you know, typing as fast as they possibly can to try and discredit you, discredit me, discredit everyone concerned. That's not a conspiracy theory, and it's also
show up right away.
It's not something that happens at random. Oh, it's just some guy who decided to do 100 tweets on, you know, replying to that, attempting to discredit the story. It's not a coincidence. Poking the bear. I just want to say thank you for bringing that up. Because honestly, for me, that's the entire secret of all of this. Is just you poke them and then information comes out. It's like a bubblegum machine. Yeah. You know, especially it's like, oh, here's a confession. Oh, here's a confession. You know. So, you know.
It's about influence. So the wedging that's occurring right now, trying to malign me, continuing against Jim and Hi-Fi and you, is because this quartet right here is powerful, and we have courage, and we have truth on our side. We're not saying definitively, this is what you must know about this, and I am the end all be all in this. We are doing the job of journalism, activists, citizen journalists, and network analysts, and people with cyber, you know, tech backgrounds, and Jim with his, you know, gaming intel to see how people's minds are being gamed. And the fact that we have influence is why it is not beyond the pale to think that, you know, those who are traitors to our country and to truth and to democratic principles would not appreciate it. So I do want to just say repeatedly, in an information war, there are no rear areas. And that one of the things I reflect on, speaking of Wes Clark Jr., who we talked about earlier, the subject of the podcast American PSYOP, when the election of 2016 occurred, his father, retired general, had run for president, was the head of NATO, Wes Clark, said, America is now going to become like Russia. You know, keep your head down, get a job, look after your family. Well, Wes heard him say that, but he also knew that he was going to be on the front lines to fight, and he couldn't just, you know, lay low and write out fascism. So when we talk about bloggers and journalists and all the attacks that we have been enduring, that's exactly what happened in Russia over the last few decades, which is why, you know, truth is so dialed down and propaganda is always cranked up to 11. And so while we can fight it, I think it's our duty to. And speaking of that, Jackie, unfortunately, you have experience as a woman in this war, being targeted repeatedly, unfortunately. But it's also given you great insights on how to mentally steel yourself so you can continue on, if you're going to continue on the front lines of this battle. So can you describe some of the things that, if you're willing to, that you've experienced, and then how you've just become like such a mentor to me in how you then proceed in your defense?
Yeah, thank you, Heidi. I appreciate that I've been able to help you. And if there are any words that I can share with anyone out there who's experiencing, fear of hacking and harassment and targeting by the vast hordes of fake accounts that are allowed to establish themselves and to live on Twitter, many of which far predate Elon Musk, right? You see accounts that are out there harassing that were started in 2011. You just kind of have to ask yourself, how have you survived so long? And the answer is the place is crawling with intel agencies. The place is crawling with PR firms, with influence marketing agencies, right? Just everyone who wants to get you to believe something is there. And so I think walking into a social media environment without having an understanding of that is a bit like sitting a kid in front of the TV with Sunday morning commercials, right? And not explaining to that child that there are, I've explained all this to my 8-year-old, right? She doesn't really want to hear it, but I have to explain it to her. There are companies whose job it is to try to get me to buy things for you, right? If you don't have that basic understanding of the world, you're totally going to get lost in social media because you're still assuming that the people to your left and your right are actually part of your community. And they work really hard in order to make you believe that. So that when you click on that bio, when you look through the feed, you're hopefully right away seeing something that causes you to click back away from their bio, not to dig any deeper into their feed and to simply accept what they're telling you, that, that's just a point of interest, right? And you'll see this a lot with older people. Older people will take one point that they heard somewhere and they will give it a veracity that is undeserved because that account presented itself as having veracity in a way that made sense to that person's psychology. And that happens over and over every day ad nauseum. So first thing is just to understand that you're in an adversarial environment full of corporations and organizations that want you to believe something, whether it's for the purpose of selling you something or for the purpose of destroying democracy. Number two is realizing that none of these people, right? Like I'm being really it's kind of questionable. People,
their accounts. Their accounts.
Right, their account. Exactly right. So with the automation, the evidence of automation that we've seen, we know that one person can control many accounts. We know that the new Chat GPT and GPT-4 being integrated, right? Language models can now be run on a single MacBook, right? If you have a recent MacBook, you can run a decent language model on there that's trained on abuse, right? And you can abuse anybody you want. You can literally automate your replies, right? You might have to do this in a way that's a little like cat and mouse over time because the platform might decide that you're doing automated stuff and kick you off. But that's not the case anymore because they need daily active users, right? Elon needs any proof that he possibly can that he's got people who care about the platform and are interested in it. And so every little point of abuse is just another bit of engagement. So understanding that engagement is the name of the game and what a lot of people are looking for, right? Stops you from quote tweeting things, which bring traffic to people that are bad actors, right? Gets you to consider, maybe I'll take a screenshot and put an X over it with my photo editor before posting it so that people know that's not my opinion. And I don't think it's a good opinion. And if they scroll past my feed, they're going to see that X and they're going to extra read it. And they're going to say, why did Jackie say that this was crap? So one again is realizing you're in an adversarial environment and steeling yourself mentally against that. Know who your friends are, because there are plenty of people that you know in real life and people that you know from your professional networks that are out there, and realize that they can also get taken in by disinformation, right? Number three, you've got to be really good about making sure that your own information environment is as clean as possible. So that means on Twitter today, you have to avoid the For You page unless you're, a researcher doing research on For You. You can't just go to For You and scroll past and expect not to be influenced by the content that they have specifically chosen to influence you. You are not cognitively capable as a human being with 10,000-year-old wetware, a brain that hasn't really evolved in 10,000 years, is now dealing with teams of people who have psychologists and social scientists developing new capabilities, building capabilities into the user experience of their products, as TikTok has done very successfully. Right. So, all of this stuff, these are psychological measurement devices. Every time you scroll on TikTok, you're giving them information. Every time you swipe away, when you click not interested, when you like, when you reply, whatever you do, every bit of activity on every social media site is used to create that social profile of you, that psychological profile of you. And, our concern, definitely in the cyber community when Twitter was rolling over to Musk, is the question of what happens to all this data, because they certainly have that warehoused. And so you're looking at another Cambridge Analytica level type of disaster that isn't being managed by anyone at the government. And to circle back to what you said, Heidi, the intent, I think, behind the government not being honest with us about information operations is that, one, we run them ourselves. The United States runs them ourselves, and we want to be careful about what capabilities we discuss and what context we discuss them in, because we don't want blowback, and we don't want to make ourselves look like hypocrites. These capabilities are necessary, right? Like, we have to have these capabilities. What we don't want is for them to be in the hands of people who have no guardrails on their use and who aren't ethical about their use, and certainly not any like insurrectionist, separatist, anti-democratic factions within the U.S. government, which we know exist today.
That's the best reason I've ever heard for why we have not had our leaders stand up and say we are a target nation of cognitive warfare. You've actually unlocked the mystery for me. Thank you so very much.
Sucks.
It
sucks. It would be better. It would be better if it would have been better if years ago Joe Biden had stood up on stage and started to inoculate people. Yes. But now we're really far down the road. Now it becomes much harder to get ahead of narratives when we let them go so far. And I think
that's right.
There was a hope, or like a hopeful expectation that some of this stuff would peter out after the election, and that this was simply an aberration in American history that could be smoothed over. And the reality is, too many people voted for this guy. Right. That really shows the sway that the influence campaigns had. This is no longer regular campaigning. This is like throwing the psychological sink at everybody in America and saying, I'm going to give it everything that I can, and having foreign nations who are adversarial to us helping in that. And that's what I wish every American would understand today, is that there's a war for our mind. For all of our minds, for our collective democratic mind, and we're losing the war, and there isn't even an awareness that there's a war ongoing, and it sucks. You can't rant and rave about this stuff without sounding like a conspiracy theorist, because as an analyst, once you're so far down the road, you've seen so much, it becomes really hard to disentangle those factors. And so you have to tackle them one at a time, one small thing at a time. With my mother, for example, I've been working on the trans issue. Right? Mom, let's talk about trans people. I had a breakthrough with her when I described myself being in a situation where I was in a club in New York and a trans woman walked past me, and I misgendered her in my mind. And I was shocked to see what I thought was a man in the bathroom. And I said, "Excuse me, what are you doing in here?" And she said, "I'm in the bathroom. What do you mean?" And just kind of went about her business. And I felt so ashamed. And I felt so ashamed in that moment. And I realized, like, what are you doing? Just let people go to the bathroom. Don't be an idiot. They weren't hurting me. There wasn't a threat. There was only a sense of threat that was automatic and not powered by any logic. Right. And so, like, relating this conversation to her, it was almost like it unlocked it for her. She was like, oh, if you're my daughter, so you're part of my community, I accept your experiences and your beliefs. So if there's more conversation from people that you trust, the barriers tend to break down. But if there's no trust at all, nothing else can get in except reinforcement of what you already believe.
Right. I just reported this morning in Byline Supplement a massive investigative piece on the war on the gay community in America, and it is in every state, and it is fascist. And so we need to be having these conversations that you had all across this country as urgent as we can, and we need to be allies to everybody being attacked, whether that's part of your community or not, because it doesn't matter, because they'll come for everybody eventually. So thank you for sharing that story. I want to share something that you wrote to me that I think is going to be very beneficial to our viewers. When you are the subject of these attacks on your character, and they are psychological in nature, you sent me a message saying, nothing they say matters because they are nothing to you. Nothing anyone says who doesn't love you matters. And why those words were so valuable is because, like a soldier in my punk rock armor, when I have to check what's coming in to attack my work, I literally just already prepare in my head, nothing they say matters because they are nothing to you. I see what it is. As you know, I have a case that I'm documenting for law enforcement in my community, and I just keep updating it, and it doesn't hurt the way it was before. So I think it's really, really beautiful. And then also, this is kind of small comfort, but it is still somewhat comforting. We're making a difference, which is why we're under siege. We are actually making a difference in punching through the unreality that these malign actors are forcing people to live in. I know that because I hear from people all the time who just got out of what we call the cult, the Trumpist cult. They've gotten out and they're now politically homeless. They find people like me who say, come over here, the water is warm, we don't judge. We got people from all walks of life who are reading this and who want to make the world a better place. So
we've got to welcome them. We've got to welcome them back.
Absolutely. So I guess those are some of the main points I wanted to hit on. Thank you so much for your incredible interview. Hi-Fi and Jim, anything else that we should mine from Jackie before we conclude?
I am just here to say thank you for being so fucking metal. For, you know, honestly, you're one of the few people in the world that, you know, I think has both the experience and the fortitude to fucking, you know, stand up to these people. And, you know, my deepest respect. Thank you for being here.
I appreciate it. I appreciate you saying that. It's born of trauma, Jim. You know, I was way too young on internet relay chat.
I totally understand. I mean, one of the things for me is I was there literally at the beginning of this, right? I mean, they're using my shit half the time to, you know, hurt people. We were all there at the beginning, and to you fucking trolls out there, you know, we're here to clean up your mess. Mm-hmm. We're the grown-ups. You know, I'm sorry to bring you this news, you know, as they say. So thank you.
Literally nothing. There is not a single thing that any of these people could say that could impact my own sense of self, my confidence in my own analysis and my facts, unless they actually bring me other facts, right? But they never have other facts, Jim. What they're interested in doing,
no facts. It's all about you. It's about you.
Jackie. Wow, Jackie, you suck. Wow, I don't know about her. She's weird. She sucks. But realistically, they never actually have anything to counter in terms of, like, that, you know, conversation of a factual nature. And so that's the point at which you just, like, yeah, either hide, reply, and block if it's just super low value. If there's value in responding, because the people who, you know, read your feed, you know, need to understand what the context is in which you are responding to this individual or why they showed up, like, feel free to educate your audience and reply and then block them. You know, like, have fun with these people. If people are adversarial and openly aggressive with you on the internet, I highly encourage you to participate up until the point that it harms your own psychology. And you have to be aware, if you want to play these games, you got to be aware as to exactly where that line is, right? Protect your mental, but, like, fuck all these people, right?
Yeah, I don't have time for it. It's a time suck because I am going after the boss level. So I do not have time for the for the low paid, minions. I just don't.
Imagine being someone, imagine being such a freaking loser that the only way you can make a living is by posting hatred and vitriol on the internet. Like not just doing it, not even doing it for fun or for free because you're just a damaged individual. You're a damaged individual who has to do this to make money. Like, bro, it's pathetic. Like, get a real job, like do something else. It's like everybody's laughing at you.
Hi-Fi and I right now are writing a 12-step program for trolls. We're actually encouraging. Get out, guys. Yeah. Number 2 is what is it? Number 2, touch grass.
Number 2 is touch grass.
It's a great double entendre. Okay, Hi-Fi, take us out.
All right. God. All right. I would like you. I have a very practical question that a term I would like you to define, and then I have a follow-up question that is more theoretical. My first question is, could you describe for our audience, since you are quite familiar with information security, what a honeypot is?
Yeah, a honeypot is if you want to think of a salient example, we can talk about Project Veritas going on dates with Twitter engineers and then recording that date, going on multiple dates with the same person and asking them questions about their workplace, which they then edit and chop up into an unflattering video. It's an example of a honeypot, right? A honeypot is anything desirable that causes your target to go to it, right? There's honey in a pot that was left out and someone's going to find it.
And one thing I want to add to that, Hi-Fi, is that if anybody really wants to take a look at what she was just talking about, please watch the undercover video of Channel 4 News with Cambridge Analytica execs on how frequently that tactic's deployed. Okay.
The reason I bring that up is because while I have dabbled a little bit in cybersecurity, I'm not as well versed as you. So every single machine and device that I've used since I started going after this network is now offline and stashed in a secure place. So I hope our people watching take that into account. The second question I have, and this is theoretical, if you, with your experience, saw a group of private intelligence operators, online trolls, useful idiots, carrying out an operation designed to recruit people into a messianic cult to overthrow their government, would you do anything you possibly could to disrupt it?
I mean, absolutely, yes. Look, this is democracy. Democracy in America is at an existential crisis point, and not enough people realize this. Faith in everything is low. Faith in the presidency, the office of the presidency, faith in the rule of law, faith in absolutely everything has been attacked. And so I think that if we want this American experiment to continue, I think all of us need to do everything that we can to recognize the traitors in our midst and find ways to bring them to justice.
Thank you.
That's our interview. That's our interview. Jackie, I'm so grateful for you. Grateful for your intelligence and your bravery and also your friendship.
And me too.
To our future president, I appreciate you being here.
I hope I make it up there someday, Jim. If only to prove you right.
If you do make it up there, I would like to be the first cabinet member specifically in charge of trolling. That would be.
Yeah.
Oh, look, you're national security advisor. I mean, you're right there in the cabinet. Gotta have you.
I would be happy with just comms. All right. Thank you so much. Go back to a beautiful day with your family.
Thanks so much.
Much love. Bye.
Bye.